Wonderful. Great afternoon, everyone. Before we kind of get started, can I get a bit of a temperature in the room? Who of you is here mainly because you're interested in cryptocurrencies out of all the applications that blockchain has? Could you show with a show of hands? Cryptocurrencies? Okay. Who's more interested in all the other applications other than cryptocurrencies and blockchain? Oh, wow. Really? That's interesting. Can I also know, who of you kind of got into the blockchain crypto field 2018, maybe 2019? Show of hands? A few of you? 2017? Okay. How are you feeling right now with all this depression at the moment? Okay. 2016? 2015? 2014? Wow. 2013? 2011? 2010? No one? 2009? Anyone Satoshi here? Okay. Fantastic. What I would love to do is talk a bit how I got into the space now 5 years ago, what really excited me, and almost more important, what excites me even more going forward. I am actually from Austria, a very small country in Europe, in the mountains, full of snow, and so if you want to become a professional athlete there, you always kind of become a professional skier. And so I wanted to become a professional athlete. Guess what I did? I became a professional surfer because Austria doesn't have any kind of border to a coast, but I love being the rebel. I love doing everything a bit different. And the reason this is really important, that for 10 years I was a professional kite surfer and I traveled all around the world, was I've seen some really horrible accidents. And the reason this is important was because it made me become a medical doctor. So I studied medicine, became a trauma surgeon, graduated in 2011, and started working in a trauma station in Innsbruck where I grew up. And there, I realized something that was really profound. And it was, so many people would benefit if they could somehow store their data in a way that they can control it, but no one can steal it from them. Because we had so many patients come in every single day, some were unconscious, some had the worst accidents you could imagine. And every single time, we had to do every test from scratch. We had to take their blood tests, everything from scratch. We didn't have a medical history. But there was no good solution to this, until I found out about blockchain. And I learned about this technology actually the first time in 2011 when a patient tried to pitch me Bitcoin and tried to tell me how I should invest into this new cryptocurrency and this new online currency. I would get rich quick. And this patient even wanted to give me some coins for free. He had like thousands of them because Bitcoin back then was worth cents. And I thought, no, what a stupid idea, a digital currency. And it took until 2014 when I realized this could transform so many industries. And for me, this need was medicine. And so I quit working as a doctor and actually moved to Singapore in order to get started in blockchain. I learned everything there is about cryptography. I learned everything there is about all these economics, game theoretical ideas that happen on a blockchain. And I wanted to start my company in the medical field for blockchain. And it was way too early in 2014. And so in 2015, I meet two other friends who are completely fascinated about this idea of finance and blockchain. And so that's how I got into cryptocurrencies in 2015. We started a company together in May 2015, and in 2017, we did one of the largest ICOs actually to date. We raised over $80 million to build this company called 10x, where we make cryptocurrencies spendable with a debit card. And so after 3 years, at the beginning of this year, and I don't know who's following the news in the crypto system, I left the company. I left the company that I co-founded, that I was the president of, and there was a huge outcry, why would I leave the company? And there's a couple of reasons. Some were that myself and the other founders always had a different vision on where this company should go, and they're still taking the company, and hopefully they're doing a really great job, and they're making the company the unicorn that hopefully this company is supposed to be. But for me, it was always more than just cryptocurrencies. There was a different reason that I got into this space. For me, it's always about waves. And waves as a surfer, for those of you that ever surfed, you know one very simple thing. If you look at the amateur surfers, they see that there's waves out there, but they always have the wrong timing. They're always too late, too early, they just never have the right timing. And then you have the professionals. And the professionals, seemingly, they spot themselves out on the sea in a place where you're like, why would you spot yourself there? I mean, there's no waves. And just a couple minutes later, suddenly there's this huge set rolling in, and they grab this perfect wave. And you're like, wow, why can they do it? And it's really about spotting those waves and riding them and understanding that. And that is what a couple of companies have done, and a couple of companies don't do it. We have seen this with Apple and Nokia. We have seen this with Blockbuster and Netflix. We have even seen this with individuals, like Rockefeller understanding how important oil was, and how unimportant it's becoming, and how other things become way more and more important. So we have had this industrial revolution, we had this digital revolution, and this wave that I see that I think so many people are still underestimating. Yes, they know about cryptocurrencies, and yes, they know that there's blockchain. But this revolution of trust is something that I really believe is completely transforming a lot of the industries that we're in. And what I would love to discuss today is how can it transform your kind of area, your industry, what I've seen over the past 5 years in this ecosystem and in this space. Trust is something very, very, very fundamental. The way trust has been built up over the last thousands of years is going to get completely disrupted over the next 10, 20, 30 years. And I think in 50 or 100 years, people will define trust in a completely different way than we've ever done this before. And suddenly applications will be possible how they've never been before. If we just do a really brief overview, then we have trust or consensus, agreement. And so far, trust has always been established in a centralized way. And now for the very first time, we can do this in a decentralized way, where everyone can chip in the same way. And that's where DLTs, decentralized ledger technologies, come in, or distributed ledger technologies, blockchain. And one of those applications is cryptocurrencies. In my book called Blockchain 2.0, the next killer application after Bitcoin, I actually talk about over 100 applications that I have seen over the last 5 years, and that I see for the next 25 years, that very few people are actually thinking of. The most famous one, Bitcoin, started in 2008, 2009. So far had 3 huge popularity waves. The very first one was in 2011. Then we had the one in 2014, that was the wave that I got in. And now we had the wave in 2017. To me, Bitcoin is not necessarily a cryptocurrency. To me, Bitcoin is a crypto asset. I see Bitcoin way more as digital gold than I would see it as a cryptocurrency. But so the interesting question is, where did all these waves come from, and what's going to be the next wave? 2011 was the tech geeky wave. That's where all the tech people that understood this back then kind of got in. 2014 was where people who were very familiar with tech, like myself, we kind of got in. In 2017, where did the wave 2017 come from? It actually came from the next blockchain application. And that was the decentralized apps, the dApps, based on Ethereum. Most of all, the ICOs, and I blame myself guilty as well in this, because in my past company, we had a large input in there. Still today, it's the largest ICO we ever did in Asia. There's no large ICO in Asia back then that we did, until today. But so if you look at all these ICOs that started in 2016, the statistics are dramatic. 81% can be written off as a scam. 11% failed or they're dead. Only 8% are actually running at the moment. And if we look at actual numbers, then we have 24-hour user numbers. And I'm not sure if you can see them in the back. The kind of resolution on the screen is not the best. But what you can see is majority of the dApps in the left upper corner, games. Then we have exchanges, we have collectibles, we have gambling, and we have some marketplaces. No real dApp that came out that's actually in the top 25 dApps that's being used, and this statistic is from the end of 2018. Now, if you look at the 24-hour user numbers, you see that some of these dApps are only being used by 100 or 200 people. And still, these dApps have market caps of hundreds of millions, some even billions of dollars. To me, this is insane. Yet, the World Economic Forum predicts that in the next 6 years, 10% of the global GDP, so we're talking about trillions, so that's thousands of billions of dollars, will be stored in blockchain. And so far we have Bitcoin and we have those dApps, or some other cryptocurrencies. And those dApps don't seem to work in a very great way at the moment. So if we go to coinmarketcap.com, we can look, okay, so the target over the next 6 years is $6,000 to $7,000 billion, and at the moment we are at around $134 billion, which is around about 2% of the target. So where, in the next 6 years, is those extra 98% supposed to be coming from? Is the World Economic Forum wrong, or Are we just kind of not paying attention to what's happening? Now, even here at the conference, we've heard about, this is kind of the end of this entire blockchain segment. And I visited a couple, and I've heard of a couple of very innovative applications. I'm telling you, there's still a lot that people are not even considering. They're not even talking about. And out of the 100 that I describe in this book, Blockchain 2.0, the next kill application of the Bitcoin, I want to take out some that are really short-term that I think are going to happen this year, that I don't think are innovative, and I think we're going to have the same problem as with dApps. I'm going to talk about some that I think are going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years. And then I'm going to be talking about some that I think are going to be happening in 15, 20, maybe even later. And in there, I actually talk about stuff like space travel, space communication, how this is not going to work without a decentralized ledger. This is very, very futuristic, because first, Elon has to solve how to do all these things. But then, other problems will come, especially when we talk about being at Mars and how does Mars and Earth communicate in a synchronous state, for example. These are all problems that very few people think about. So, one of the most basic applications that we're going to see next are security tokens. And I don't know, who has heard about security tokens? Can I see with a show of hands? Okay, who has no clue what these are? So then I'm going to explain them a bit. Okay, great. Security tokens are nothing else than putting something that is a security already, like a stock or a bond or something, on a blockchain. So instead of having an Apple stock trade on the New York Stock Exchange, you have it on a blockchain. And so the very fair question is, why even do this, right? Why take the worst out of both cases, so in this case, all the regulation that a stock has, and all the slowness and stiffness and rigidity that a blockchain has, and why combine those? I don't know either, but people are doing this right now. And it's happening by the dozens and by the hundreds and by the thousands. I would not focus too much on this space. That's just my opinion. Because this is just the next thing that's going to be happening. I actually wrote a lengthy blog post on this, the 5 major problems with crypto securities. And it had, I think, over 100,000 views within like a week, because I really highlighted the problem of regulation, about global regulation. The regulation in the US is completely different than the regulation in Europe, completely different than where I live in Singapore. Liquidity. There's so many major issues. Liability. If one of those things, we're talking about mostly startups. If a startup doesn't do something proper, whose fault is this? Is it the startup's fault, or is it just the normal probability of startups failing? Major, major issues. So I'm not a big fan of these security tokens. And I know that so much stuff is going into this right now, and I'm going to show you a bit of a slide later on where I can kind of highlight why this is happening. The next huge use case right now are these so-called stablecoins. And there's 4 different ways to do a stablecoin. You can fiat collateralize it, commodity collateralize it, crypto collateralize it, or don't collateralize it at all. The most famous stablecoin is Tether. Tether is a stablecoin where each coin is worth $1. And it's hopefully redeemable against real-world dollars. So you can control this coin, and you hold dollars. My big question is always, why not hold dollars? Why trust the Tether? I don't know. No one can answer this, but it's there. Now, one thing that I think is a very interesting use case is so-called Maker DAO. 2% of all Ether is locked in there. They have been having some problems lately in the past couple of weeks. But so far, it's been very interesting, this project. They're completely decentralized. It's a decentralized contract. And this contract, through a game theoretical model, keeps the DAI price at $1. It's a very interesting model. I met their founders 1.5 years ago. I thought they were crazy. I thought they were not going to be able to do this. And I said, hey, if Ether ever crashes, your DAI is dead. What did Ether do? Ether crashed from $1,300 to $100. You know what happened to DAI? Was stable as a spot. Was very impressive. So their model and their contract seems to be very, very legit, seems to be doing really well. So let's see how this continues, and especially what other kind of forms of contractual means can you have going forward. Still, my question always remains, why not hold dollar instead of this token? I understand that in some countries, some regulations, you're going to have some problems, but you already hear noises from the SEC saying that these stable coins are securities as well, so there's no way around and no advantage. Now, the next move that we've been seeing is Facebook, JP Morgan, all coming out with their company coins. So JP Morgan announced they're going to have their own coin. Facebook announced that they're going to be thinking about the space. For any of you who is interested in getting a job at Facebook, Facebook, I think at the moment has 25 open positions in the blockchain space. So like these companies are heavily investing in this. And they're all bringing out their own kind of company coins. For what, I'm not 100% sure, but I mean, it's quite innovative, right? And so blockchain always sounds good. The next thing that's going to be this huge use case is tokenization. Tokenization has a very interesting use. So imagine you want to build this wind park, and you need funding for this wind park. So let's just assume one of those windmills is $100,000, and then you can go and you split these $100,000 into 100,000 individual tokens. And so now people can buy these tokens, and they own a little bit of generating energy. Now what you can do is you can distribute the funds that being produced to these token holders. This exists already, you can do this, but mostly these funds are being distributed every quarter of a year. Because blockchains can be updated so easily, you could do this every second. And at the end, that's what a lot of people want to have. They want to have this immediate gratification. They don't want to wait 1 quarter until I get these returns. I want to open an app, click refresh, oh, there's a cent more. Click refresh, oh, there's a cent more. And if you look at some of the most successful finance apps at the moment in the US, Robinhood, for example, the reason why they're so successful is this gamification, is this easy use case, is the user experience. And there, even though there's no underlying benefit to the investment, it's still, the wind park stays the wind park, even if it uses blockchain or not, it doesn't matter. But there is an additional benefit to this. So I do see some merit of a blockchain there, but then again, I'm not 100% sure, couldn't a centralized system maybe do this better, faster, cheaper? And the reason I'm bringing all these use cases up is because there is a question, and this question comes up in the media all the time. It gets asked in the news. I ask myself this question. I'm pretty sure it's in all of you as well. And that is this question, why do we struggle with blockchain applications? Why do we not completely grab them? Why are we not completely excited about them? I'm going to tell you why. Because they all look like this. With a question mark times a question mark equals 91. I'm telling you, there's only one solution to this equation if you're not allowed to use the number 1. So any number times any number has to equal 91. It exists. It takes some time to calculate it, even though these are really small numbers. It's a cryptographic problem, actually. But it's a very simple calculation, you will see. And this is how all the blockchain applications look like at the moment. Why? Because we start with the solution. If we started with the problem, 7 times 13, it still takes a little bit, but then it becomes quite easy to understand. 7 times 13 equals 91. The problem is we all, or most companies, start with 91. We start with the solution in mind, not the problem. All the successful companies out there start with a problem. And then they solve this problem, and they get a unique solution. In blockchain, we sit here, and we have this solution called a blockchain, and no one really thinks about what's the actual problem that this thing is supposed to be solving. And so we're trying, and we're trying, and we're trying, and we're basically sitting here trying to solve this problem. What times what equals 91? Because we have this 91, it's a blockchain, it's so fantastic. What's going to be our problem for this? And people sit here and they're like, we don't know, I don't know, why should I use this? Instead of just saying, hey, this is your problem, I have a solution for you. I think the master of all this was always Steve Jobs doing this at any Apple product. No one understood what an iPad was supposed to do, but suddenly he highlighted the problem, and everyone got what an iPad was supposed to do. And in my opinion, many, many blockchain companies do it the other way around. We could learn, though, from the past, for example, internet. If we look back and we say current, so 2017, the last 30 years, this is pretty much when the internet has been kind of existing, the modern internet. So now, in the blockchain space, we've basically seen the first 10 years. And if we look at the first 10 years of internet, we see Microsoft did really well, Netscape did really well, and so on. But if we look at it, we actually notice that these are all companies who are very infrastructure providers. They've been providing infrastructure, access to the internet, AOL, hardware, and so on. Now let's think about what has been working over the past 10 years in blockchain. Exactly the same thing. People who created coins, people who did mining, people who built infrastructure like exchanges. And all these things have been working really, really, really well. But if you look over the next 10 and 20 years, you suddenly see companies like Facebook, like Amazon, you see completely new companies pop up that had nothing to do with what works in the first 10 years. And this is exactly the same thing that we're seeing right now. Bitmain used to be one of the largest companies in the entire ecosystem, providing mining supply, mining hardware. And they've been struggling massively. Some people are even saying right now, and this is not me, I'm just quoting some experts who really did some research that the only reason why Bitmain is going for an IPO right now is because they're bankrupt and they need the funds, otherwise they're going to go bust. And this from a company who used to be able to do billions and billions of dollars, and suddenly they're going bankrupt. Exchanges are being bought out. Exchanges claiming that they have problems. Coins going bankrupt. It's because they're not asking themselves, what's the next evolutionary step? What's a real problem that I can solve? So let's discuss a couple of those problems. Let's discuss a couple of problems over the next 10 years and then over the next 20 years. Let's start with something that companies like IBM are working on right now. And it's this problem, how can I track goods and services all over the world without having to trust anyone? What a great question to ask. How can I track goods and services all over the world without having to trust anyone? Medications. Why are you buying medications where the ingredients are from countries that you trust? Because trust is in the question. You wouldn't buy medications from a country where you don't trust the ingredients because you're not sure what's in there. Maybe they're cheating, maybe they're lying. We see this all over the world. People are willing to pay more when the ingredients are known and they're trustworthy where they're coming from. So companies can charge a markup for providing this trust. Now think about if there's a 9-year-old somewhere in a bedroom who has this really ingenious idea in how to supply trust in a completely different way. By creating a decentralized system where there's checkpoints all around the world. Everyone can do this with a smartphone. And suddenly goods can flow through a service and they can be tracked, they can be traced, time-stamped, quantified, completely hashed, everything's completely secure. And suddenly I don't need to trust the company anymore. What's going to happen to all the pharmaceutical companies who are going to charge all these high markups? Because, we are producing in a very, very secure manner. Well, but there's this other company that I can completely trust as well. The trust is completely different. It's the same as online, offline 20 years ago, where no one dared to put in the credit card in Amazon because who is Amazon? They don't have any stores. Yeah, but look what happened. And this is going to be the exact same thing. The very first use case I've seen this were diamonds. This was 2015, I think. And the very first blockchain in supply chain, this is what it's called, they asked this question, how can I track and trace diamonds in a way more secure way than what's happening today, where people cannot bribe the system, where someone anywhere around the world can trace where diamond came from, who had it, who's selling it, and so on. And we're going to see so many of those use cases. So I'm telling you one thing, any one of you here who works in a company or who owns a company, where some kind of supply chain is in there, there's a reason why IBM is heavily investing into understanding how this works and what this does. And I would highly recommend you to also pay attention there. Because I really think this could completely transform your business. Completely. The way you were building trust 20 years ago is going to be completely different in 20 years. Because of a decentralized system where people can timestamp the trace or the way a certain good or service flows. Data privacy is something we've been hearing all the time. It's this question that I got into blockchain with. How could I store the information of my patient where the patient can control the data and I cannot manipulate it or I cannot get hacked? And this is actually a problem that's, in my opinion, more current than ever and more acute than ever. If I had to start a company today, at the moment I'm more in advisory roles. I've been helping a couple of companies in this space, smaller ones, larger ones. But if I had to start a company right now, this would be the space I would get in. In the US, you all know this case, at least I think so. Who have heard the case of the Golden Gate Bridge killer? Happened, I think, last year in San Francisco. Really? No one? Oh, come on, this was in the news all over. There was this case in San Francisco where there was this cold case of a serial killer who murdered a couple of people 50 years ago, I think, or 40 years ago, and no one had a trace. They had DNA samples, but they didn't have a trace. And suddenly, out of complete magic, 1.5 years ago, I think, the police said, we found the killer. And everyone was like, yay, this is really awesome. And it is really awesome. But what's really scary is the way they found him. And I tell you why. The reason they found him was not because they had DNA samples of him, but there were enough people who submitted their DNA samples to services like 23andMe and so on, and had a DNA sampling. And if you read the terms and conditions, it says in there that they are allowed to do tests on this DNA in an anonymous way. except for if there's some criminal underlying case that they have to release this to court. So this guy was smart enough, he worked for the police, he was a police officer, he was smart enough not to ever give away his DNA. But some distant relatives did. And since you don't control your own data, suddenly it became clear that because of these SNPs, these are repeated in the DNA, it became clear that there was like these relatives around, they had it pinned down to 3 people. And they knew that 3 people were the ones who were probably going to be the killer. And so they kind of tracked this down, they tracked the guy down, got the DNA sample from him, and then they could confirm that he was the killer. So in this case, this was great. But think about, you have some rare genetical disease. And I don't know, 7 of your relatives do a DNA test, you don't do it. And suddenly these DNA tests become public to your insurance company. And they realize, hey, you know what? There's a chance of, I don't know, 0.0013% that you have this genetic disease, but if you have it, you're pretty much uninsurable. And suddenly your premium goes up radically. And you didn't do anything. You didn't do any test. You didn't talk to your insurance. You didn't lie on your insurance test. Purely because of some probability that someone can calculate. Minority report style. And this is just the beginning of how scary this is going to get. I think we are just seeing a bit of an awakening of data privacy at the moment with what's going on at Facebook and so on. And I totally believe that the future here with data privacy is going to be so important. And here, the problem, how can you own your data? How can you own it? There's no way around blockchain. It doesn't exist. You can't own your data anywhere else. Because as soon as it's stored somewhere, someone else owns it. But if it's stored everywhere and nowhere, like in a blockchain, you're the only one who can control it with your private key. This would be the use case I would be getting in right now. Any one of you who deals with data of people, who makes money of people, be prepared that probably in 10 years, you cannot make money of data the way you're doing it today. It's going to be a completely different model. Social media, massive, massive disruption. There's a reason why Mark Zuckerberg understands this and gets into blockchain. Yes, he gets into blockchain right now with cryptocurrencies, just like everyone did, but he understands what's happening. And he understands he needs to change his business model. Because otherwise, Facebook is probably going to go bust, because they're not going to make much money in 10 years anymore the way they're doing it today. Staying in the medical field, insurance, huge field, humongous field. A very, very good friend of mine here in the US owns one of the largest car insurance franchise businesses. And he sold his car insurance franchise for a ridiculous sum. And the reason is exactly that, because he understood blockchain is going to disrupt this crazily. Now, for him, this was a massive bet. So we're talking about a $3-digit million bet that he's making there, right, based on the information. Hopefully, you don't have to make such crazy bets. But what I want to tell you is it's important to pay attention to this. So let's think about through how insurance works. And insurance, this is really basic now. Insurance is nothing else than a bet. A bet that you are betting on something that hopefully never occurs. Let's say your house burning down. So let's say this is your house, and let's say your house is worth $250,000, and you pay a premium, this is just purely example, of $100 every month. So you give the insurance $100 every month and hope that your house doesn't burn down. But if it burned down, the insurance gives you that $250,000. Hopefully, because maybe they're not willing to pay. Or maybe something else happens. So how does the use case work for the insurance? Well, the insurance doesn't only insure your house. They hopefully insure hundreds, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of houses. So if one house burns down, okay, not a big problem for them because they kind of diversified. Hopefully for them, not every single house burns down because then they would go bust. So how would this work? Well, you could have a smart contract instead of the insurance company. And instead of an insurance company paying me the money if something burns down, the smart contract pays me the money. Advantage? The smart contract is forced to pay me. There's no yes or no. It's a smart contractual agreement. We could talk about oracles. How would the smart contract know if the house burned down? Let's put this aside for now. Let's only talk about the case that you actually get paid. The advantage for you also is you don't have to pay $100. You probably only pay $50. Why? Is the premium cheaper? Well, you don't have an insurance company to pay for. It's a smart contract, and that thing is super cheap. Now here's a major problem though, and that's why there's companies who are doing this right now, and the major problem with these companies is that their bets they're making are on not as exciting things as they could be. They're betting on the death of a president. They're betting on outcomes that are, in my opinion, immoral and shouldn't be being able to be bet on. But because it's a decentralized smart contract, no one can stop it. That's why these stupid things happen. And you're betting $50 every month that it's not burning down. And hopefully it never burns down. But so now the next neighbor says, Julian, what a fantastic idea. Let me also bet on your house, $50. Why would my neighbor bet $50 on my house not burning down? Well, let's think about this in a second. The next neighbor says, what a great idea. Let me also bet on your house not burning down. I pay $50 every month. If I win, I get $250,000 if your house burns down. The next neighbor, and suddenly I have 100 neighbors all paying $50 every month and would be getting $250,000 if my house burned down. So an event that was supposed to be unlikely, namely not burning down, could suddenly become likely because 100 people want my house to burn down. Again, suddenly imagine if this starts happening on life insurance. And suddenly people don't pay life insurance for themselves, but they suddenly pay life insurance on your life. Ooh, that gets weird. So far, this doesn't work because an insurance doesn't allow that. The problem is always, if no one is in charge, no one can stop it. Every upside has a downside. That's the main problem to be solved in insurance. That's why I'm a bit more pessimistic on insurance, but I'm telling you, someone is going to solve this in the next 3 years, and insurance is going to be completely disrupted. Completely. Because it's so made for smart contracts and for blockchain. A huge use case is going to be those non-fungible tokens. Who of you here knows what a non-fungible token is? Who has no clue, so I know that I have to explain this? Okay, that's a really important one. By the name, non-fungible means that it's not fungible. Fungible means that something is the same as something else. So if I have a dollar bill and you have a dollar bill, by definition, those two dollar bills have to have the same value. If they wouldn't, then $1 bill would be more worth. What's worth more, one $10 bill or 10 single dollar bills? Well, it has to be the same. That's why they're fungible. Non-fungible means that coins or tokens exist where one token is more valuable than another token. A very simple example for you is, for example, collecting stamps. We all know this. There are stamps and there's other stamps. Some stamps are worth more. Some stamps are worth less. And this is non-fungible. The very first non-fungible application of blockchain was that of CryptoKitties. Who of you has ever heard of CryptoKitties? Okay, who has no clue what they are, so then I'm going to explain them. Okay, CryptoKitties, very simple, are these ugly little digital cats that someone created in 2017, and they're on a blockchain, and every cat is different than everyone else, and for some reason, I don't know why, people thought they were super valuable, and they started trading them for $100,000 each. Crazy. The thing is, they're rare. That's important. So you can track that this cat only exists once. So for example, this really weird green cat with a scarf only exists once. And you can prove that it only exists once. This is huge. And the reason this is going to be huge is, for example, gaming. Gaming is an industry, and for some you don't know this, gaming is worth way more than the movie business and the song business together. Gaming is humongous. Gaming has one problem, especially with those items. I don't know who has kids here who plays Fortnite. Fortnite is a game where 100 players get dropped on an island and they all kind of fight itself until one is left over. This is one of the most valuable and most successful games to date. You know how much it costs to play this game? It's free. So how the heck does this game make money? It was very simple. In-app or in-game purchases. So you can buy things. Makes a lot of sense. I can buy a better weapon, right? Wrong again. You cannot buy anything that helps you in the game. You can only buy things that give you status. Interesting concept. Status so far only exists in the physical world. But suddenly, I can create status, something rare, in the virtual world. And this is the next level. And it's going to come. With blockchain and NFTs, you can suddenly create something rare that's digital. Hasn't been possible before. And you can take this a step further. You could take Nike and say, look, we're going to make a very special shoe. Or let's use Under Armour, my favorite athlete, Steph Curry. I know I'm going to get some problems there. But let's say Steph Curry, Under Armour, and we say, hey, you know what? We're going to make a special edition, Steph Curry, 500 sneakers only. But so how do I know that there's only 500 sneakers? Well, they have a tag on the shoe. OK, but so why don't you send the number 3 to 2 people? I would never meet this other person. How do I know that you're not lying to me? Good question. I don't know how to solve this problem. Well, I do. Blockchain, NFT. So every single shoe gets one NFT. And so when I buy the shoe, there's a QR code on there. I can scan it, and I can see straight away, this is my shoe. It's tracked, traced to me. I can see this is number 3. Number 4, someone owns. Number 5, someone owns. If I sell my shoe, I also have to pass on my QR code, so now someone else owns this collectible. The very first company right now is starting to do this, and I'm wondering why are not more doing this? Anyone who works with collectibles, anyone who works with status symbols, this is humongous. Handbag companies, I still understand, tracing originality, dealing with warranties, whew, massive. But let's take this a step further. Let's combine physical and virtual and do this in a really crazy way. Let's imagine I had a QR code and I could generate a virtual object through virtual reality. I'm the only one who can generate it. I'm the only one who can prove that this is mine because I'm the only one who owns it on the blockchain. And so suddenly, when all these self-driving cars are there, and suddenly, I don't know, a Lamborghini is not really worth much anymore because I cannot do much with it, I could totally see that suddenly I'm going to have a symbol, a status symbol in this way. Because it's rare. It's the only one who can own this car. No one else can own it. And so far, if I give you a picture of a Lamborghini, well, you could just copy it. And suddenly there's 2 of them, and then there's 3, and then there's 10. And I can do this obviously with everything. I could do this with planes, with any kind of item, anything that I want to have as a collectible. And you can just look at, there's a really great quote from Paul Graham, co-founder or founder of Y Combinator, a large accelerator, incubator in San Francisco. And he said, if you want to see where the future is heading and what you should be investing in, there's 2 people you should look at. It's not the investors. They got no clue. Look at children and look at the tech geeks. What are these guys playing with? Children and tech geeks. I'm telling you, they're all playing with these things. They're all playing with these virtual items. They're all buying in-app stuff, in-game stuff. For those of you that have children, ask them. And they're going to grow up, and they're going to be the next economic force. And that's going to be the next huge thing. I'm a huge believer, not necessarily in CryptoKitties, but I'm a huge believer in what could happen as an NFT in the future, connecting physical and virtual world. It's massive. And it's going to affect many, many, many people and many companies. Just think about how you make money, what's going to be your kind of income, and how this could disrupt that. Let's maybe go a bit further. So right now, I think we've been at the time scale of 7 to 10 years. I don't see NFT is going to happen tomorrow, but I think over the next 5 to 7 years, I think it's going to be massive. Let's go a bit further. We have self-driving cars. Self-driving cars, depending on when Tesla or whoever can do this, going to come. I still think it's not going to happen overnight. But let's say over the next 5 to 7 years that's going to happen. There's always one question that remains, and that is, how do I make sure that no one hacks my car? And I don't have a steering wheel, and suddenly this car goes and kills me because someone hacked it, and I can't stop this car. So how do I make this car not being hacked? Well, if we look at birds, we look at fish. We have these swarms. And how do these swarms work? How does a swarm know where to go? There's no lead fish. There's no lead bird. Well, it's because everyone and no one is in charge. And that could be the same way in cars. So it's not a central server that tells a car where to go or how to make calculations. It could be every car helps everyone. As if I would try to hack a car, it doesn't do anything because I would need to hack the entire fleet. And I know for a fact that car companies are researching this. They're researching how could decentralized systems help there. How could decentralized game theoretical behavior help that there could be an added trust factor? Now, I don't think that that's going to come first. I think first you need to have self-driving cars, but then next this is going to happen. And this is going to come in many, many fields. I think for any one of you who has ever seen a drone show, a good friend of mine runs those drone shows, for example, huge, with like 500 drones making those digital pictures. That's just the start to me. The reason she cannot do more than 500 drones is because she has only one centralized server that needs to calculate all the flight path for all these drones. And this is so complex that you cannot do more than 500 drones. But now just imagine you have millions of those things and they get really, really tiny. Then you have something called nanobots, and they can be in your body and they can completely disrupt medicine. The reason this doesn't work right now is because how am I going to tell all these little nanobots where to go in your body? Well, it doesn't because I only have this little bit of computing power. But suddenly if everyone can help everyone, it's huge. And this is going to be massive. And it's going to help a lot of people. One really cool thing that I'm going to be excited about is actually when you have, let's say, for example, and we see this with hotels already, Amazon is doing this, where we have institutions that don't have people working there. And the reason why this can be very interesting, not because it's going to cost jobs, I actually don't think so, I think it's going to add a lot of jobs, but what's going to be interesting is, for example, if I have a self-driving car, and the self-driving car becomes a unit of itself, a so-called decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. What this car then can do is, because it can make decisions by itself, if it has a good algorithm, it can become a unit by itself. And it can have a blockchain on there, and everyone can own little bits of there. And so, based on voting rights, the car can do whatever the voters, so the owners, can do, and then the dividends get paid out to the owners. The reason why this is really cool is because it's going to make the entry barrier into businesses today that are really, really expensive come down a lot, because everyone can suddenly start building this. So you could start building this device where you know this could be autonomous afterwards. And instead of having to build the entire company that costs $100 million, I just have to build this one device, and then I can sell it, and then people own it, and they can draw the profits from there. And there's a lot of great ideas to do this. It can be self-driving cars, it could be franchise businesses, it could be self-serving supermarkets, and so on. Very, very interesting to see. Now, obviously, also, I love to point these out, these small little failures that we have. For those of you that know 2016, we had the very first DAO. It was called the DAO. It was built on Ethereum. And this DAO was an investment organization or investment vehicle. So basically, everyone could invest into the DAO, and then through voting rights, people could vote on what this DAO was supposed to be investing into. And the great thing was there was no overhead because there was no one employed, so it was just this virtual organism, if you want to call it. The problem was that most people didn't read the code, didn't read the contract. But one person did, and this person figured out that out of the $150 million that were stored in there, through a trick, he could siphon $60 million out for himself. So the press and everyone titled this as a hack, and so it came down in history as the DAO hack. But so here's the interesting part. Lawyers, up till today, are not really sure if this was a hack or if this was just using a feature. It was a contract. You wouldn't call lawyers that read a contract and understand how to use the contract as cheaters. You might, but it's still a lawyer. And in this case, it was, I don't know, a coder or someone who understood the code and said, you know what, I'm going to use it in a way, I know it wasn't intended this way, but I'm going to use it in a way that the code allows me to use it. And that's going to be an interesting question going forward. How can these blockchains stay nimble? How can these blockchains, these decentralized systems, have all these really crazy use cases, but adapt to what's happening? And I think that's going to be a big question. There was another case of an IoT, Internet of Things device. In this case, this company wanted to make smart thermostats. And smart thermostats exist already, but they wanted to decentralize that so that the company itself cannot have access to it. No one could have access to it. Even though it's connected to the internet, the only person who could have access to it was the person actually at this thermostat who had the private key. Well, the problem was, once again, there was a hack in there, or a bug, or a feature, and a hacker was funny enough to set the thermostat in a way that it would increase the temperature in the room by a degree every hour. And no one could stop it. And then he was so funny as to let everyone know if they wanted to have their thermostat stop increasing the temperature and creating a sauna, they should send a certain amount of bitcoins to an address. Otherwise, he's not going to stop the sauna. And so something that was supposed to be super safe and super secure became something that was not stoppable anymore, and the people had to take a hammer and kind of chisel the thermostat out of the wall in order to make it stop. There was no other way to stop it anymore. And to me, the lesson in all this is always, the further into the future you look, the more things you might kind of miss, and the more opportunities you get with this. But at the end, the more exciting it becomes. And for me, what's always important when I talk about all these things is, yeah, there's so many use cases right now that, in my opinion, are, yeah, they're clear, but what problem do they solve? And not solving a problem is going to work short term, but you're massively going to struggle in actual adoption because there's no adoption. There's no use case, and you actually could be running a scam. And this story of Theranos actually became very, very popular, especially with the book last year called Bad Blood. Whoever hasn't read that, you should definitely read this. But for those that don't know the story, Elizabeth Holmes kind of ran this scam for a long time where she promised everyone that she was going to be able to kind of simplify how people would give blood, get testified with blood. And she would do this in a very, very easy way, just with pick testing on the finger. But then people realized this was just a hoax and it didn't work. And the funny thing was, there's one investment fund that didn't fall for this. But this investment fund normally always invests into those biotech or in these medical startups. And this is Google Ventures, or Google Invest. And this is a huge lesson. Bill Marys, the CEO and founder of Google Invest, he said, you know what? Every great idea starts out as an idea. That's fine. But at some point, you need some adoption. You need to be able to dot a line, you make dots, and the adoption curve has to go up. You need to be able to try this out. You need to be able to see this. And there was a lot of hand waving at Theranos, a lot of finger pointing, but we never saw the actual product. We never saw it work because it just didn't work. And that's a humongous lesson for blockchain. I see hype words like blockchain, like AI, like machine learning thrown into a desert, believing that this is going to make the desert grow grass. It doesn't. A blockchain is not a use case for most things, probably. It's a use case for a few things. For those things, it's going to change the world. But don't fall for all those companies that say something is blockchain and this is going to make it so much better. Don't fall for those. Understand that there needs to be an actual problem that a system can actually change and make it for better. And most of the time, it's not. I think 99% of the companies right now in the blockchain space are not doing this. And this is sad. But I think that especially right now, we're going to see this new wave of entrepreneurs come in who are really going to change the world with their decentralized applications. So it's not going to be a straight line. We know that. It's always ups and downs. There's always pitfalls. There's always craziness. And that's completely normal. Especially in times like right now when it's quiet, when you don't hear much about blockchain. I gave a talk last year. We had a larger room, same event. We had 2,500 people in the room. And the topic was, what is a cryptocurrency? That was a super boring topic. And the room was filled with 2,500 people. Now, why is the room today not full? Because that's the space, that's the ecosystem. Last year, everyone wanted to get rich quick. And now, only those that are left that are interested in understanding how this space works, this is what's left over right now. And that's when the exciting times are actually happening. I do want to actually finish with one important question. That is a big question. So who to trust when no one is in charge? And that's a scary answer for most of you and for most of us, because we have to trust ourselves. We're the ones in a decentralized system, if it doesn't work, that screwed up. And I want to show you a video, I hope the sound is working, where if something goes wrong, often you want to have a backup plan. And so I don't believe the blockchain is going to be a solution to everything. Yeah. Always a good reminder to know that some things will stay centralized. Because if stuff doesn't work out in these cases, you're really, really screwed. So your walk of shame is not down to the reception. It's, I don't know, it's somewhere completely different. Always an important reminder, blockchain will not be the only solution. Just like today, you have online and offline. You will have centralized and decentralized. The future will somewhere be the mix. Let me say one thing at the end. We're talking about making money. We're talking about changing the world. No industry, no revolution, no innovation is going to stay if it only affects a small group of people, the wealthy becoming wealthier. Internet only succeeded because everyone had a benefit. There's a clear statistic today that shows that those countries that were open to the internet, they all improved from the bottom to the top. And so this is an important question that we need to ask ourselves. Are there use cases for the third world? Are there use cases where, yes, the wealthy, and I think anyone that could come to this conference They are part of the top 5% in the world's population. But how are there use cases for the 95%? And so let's just pick out a very easy one, a very simple one. And I talk about, I think, 15 others in the book that are a bit more complex, but I think are going to be just more as powerful. But this is an easy one to understand. Imagine you go into a coffee shop, and this coffee shop says, hey, we're having this fair trade coffee. Well, right now, they have these little plaques that show that this is fair trade certified. But in the future, what's going to happen is there's a QR code, and you pull out your phone, or probably you just blink once with your contact lenses because you don't need a phone anymore. And then suddenly, you blink, and you see the entire supply chain on where this coffee came from. So you see, this is the coffee shop that I'm standing in right now. This is where the coffee came. You have the timestamps and so on. And when you pay, what you can do, you can give a tip, just like you're doing today probably. But in this case, you can exactly specify where in the supply chain the tip should go to. And so if you want to, you can give it to the server, to the waitress right there because she did a great job. But if you also want, you can say, you know what? I want to support the farmer at the very first spot on the supply chain. And you can see in a very transparent way that it actually goes there because you control it. There's no intermediary, there's no third party. And suddenly, we get a bit closer to everything. And suddenly, yes, we all benefit because there's really great applications, but it's actually a use case for everyone out there. And this is what excites me so much. And this is what makes this, to me, what I call this mission to be crypto fit for understanding what decentralization is, what blockchain is, and how all this goes forward. And so with this, I'm really glad that you guys kind of listened in for this for the last 45 minutes, I think. I would be very open to answer some questions. I have a book signing right afterwards. I can go there and answer some questions in one-on-one if you have. And other than that, I want to say thank you. And yeah, have a really nice Saturday. If you have questions, go to the microphone. Thank you. Please.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that. Really silly question, but maybe I'm not the only one in the room. How does blockchain insurance work? Who's paying?
The blockchain insurance work for, what do you mean?
Well, so, you know, if I pay money to an insurance company, they bet on other houses, so that's where the money comes from if my house burns down.
Yep.
So
in this case, okay, so in this case, instead of having a company that sits there, you have a smart contract, and that contract has an if-then calculation there. So in order to keep the smart contract alive, every month you have to pay $50, as an example. But then if there's an incident, and you can prove this incident happened, and so this is where we could have a long discussion, how could we prove to the smart contract that this incident happened? There is something called oracles, where we could kind of do this. Then this contract is programmed in a way that it's going to pay me $250,000. So how could this incident be proven to this contract? Either through a group of people, through some, it could be that it's a death certificate or some kind of certificate from the police. This could be pre-programmed. And so then the smart contract would pay me those funds. Very easy would be some digital insurance. I think digital insurances will start. For example, flight insurance. I think this is going to be the very first use case because it's mostly digital. Yes, my flight got delayed. It's a physical happening, but then it's all going to be stored digitally so that the smart contract could see, oh, yeah, the flight was actually delayed. There's enough databases that can prove that. And then I'm going to get flight delay insurance.
But I suppose it depends on other people paying into...
Sure. Of course. So it's not only me paying the smart contract. There's probably hundreds of thousands, millions of people paying the same smart contract for this insurance, just like a normal insurance. Yeah. Just that the insurance market would get globalized. Yeah. Thank you.
Hey there. So I've lived through the analog to digital experience, and the beginning of the internet, I could have bought certain domains.
Mm-hmm.
But my question is, and I have been in this crypto space for a couple of years. I understand the potential and the future, but I'm not a coder.
Yep.
So I'm wondering, what's your opinion? How can a regular person get involved in this space without investing?
I think that's a great question. I think right now it's a really great question. The last wave of companies was started in the year 2014, 2015. So during the last kind of drought. I think right now we have the same kind of drought. So it's a great time. I think I think you will need some coders, but you don't have to be the coder. I know how to code. I'm not the most talented and most skilled coder, and I don't have to be. I think many times it needs entrepreneurs, people who are willing to take risks, and it needs people who see problems that should be solved. I think if you look out there and you really see a real problem, I get pitched probably 10 ideas a day on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Julian, do you want to be an advisor here? Do you want to help raising funds for this? And I'm like, sure. What's the problem you're going to be solved, that you want solved? And people pitch me the solution. And I'm like, no, you didn't pay attention. The solution I'm not interested in. I want to understand the problem, and I want to understand, is this problem worth being solved through a blockchain? And I think this is where it starts. So my recommendation to you would be sit down, get inspiration. I mean, one of the reasons why I bring up 100 blockchain applications is because these are the problems that I see worth solving. But I'm just one human, so you probably have 50 other great ideas. Think about the problem that's being solved. If you have a really good problem, I promise you're going to find someone who's going to be able to code this with you. And you will, this is without a doubt. There's so many coders out there who are great coders, they just don't know what to code it for. Many times coders are not the most creative people. They are many times very mathematically squared thinking. And I don't know, I think this would be the only recommendation I would have for you. Really try to solve a problem. I see very few people actually doing this in the space at the moment. Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk. I really enjoyed it. So I'm curious about your feedback or input about the idea of sort of taking your personal digital identity, so to
Yep.
speak,
Oh, great.
and putting that on the blockchain, kind of solving the problem with the fact that like Facebook owns
Yep.
all your data. They even like trace your mouse movements and determine if like there's a little bit of a shake. They sell that. It could be Alzheimer's. They sell that to data to insurance companies, and now you can't. So do you feel like you could kind of speak to that digital twin and we have ownership over that? And now I can just get paid. I can sell my data to whatever company out there instead of them making them money.
I think that's a fantastic use case. I think this decentralized identification is definitely going to come. The reason I didn't bring it up in this, I talk about it in the book, but in the book I talk about it over, I think, 15 pages, because the challenge there is that you can't solve it all from the start. So the problems are so important to be solved, but you need to start in a niche, and you need to start with something. I'm advising a company right now who starts in a niche of making certificates from universities, results, any kind of exams that you're doing, and kind of makes them trustworthy by putting it on the blockchain. So that, oh, I graduated from Harvard, really? Okay, prove it. And then suddenly I can prove it on the blockchain. So, and that's how they want to start, right? So I think the problem of identity, owning identity is humongous. I think great. There, my feedback would not be like, what a stupid problem to be solved. I think more, start in a niche. I think this is such a wide concept that if you start too broad, you're not going to get any adoption. Start in a niche where you're like, great, this is going to get traction, and then afterwards scale it. Huge. I think what a great use case. Really, yeah, fantastic. Yeah. But wait, maybe I can add something. Sorry, add something. There's I talk about this also in the book. There's this massive problem of being then too transparent sometimes with your own data. If you look at in China, they're having this massive problem in testing this out. And what's happening there is with this identity is that people don't want to interact with people that are lower than them because it kind of tarnishes their identity. So that their reputation kind of tarnishes because they're interacting with the wrong kind of people. So that's obviously a bit of the counter argument, and you would need to find solutions how to solve that. So I just wanted to throw this out. I've seen this problem already, so yeah. Sorry, yeah.
So I'm thinking with the sort of proliferation of fake news and the oncoming deep fake and ability to create convincing video or audio facsimile, do you see any companies that are looking at introducing blockchain journalism or document?
So this use case is fantastic. It goes down to reputation, so it's a reputation use case. There is a company, I can't remember the name right now, I think it's called Civil or something. They've been trying to do this in journalism. They've had some massive negative press right now because of some problem. I didn't follow up on it. I wouldn't give too much on the problem that they have. I think the use case they're trying to solve is great. I'm not sure if they actually able to solve it, but I honestly, I would cheer on for everyone who would solve this, because I see so many problems right now with press, right? With all this fake stuff. great use case. I would niche it. Be sure that you don't start to try to solve everything right now. Niche it in one space. It could be journalism. In journalism for, I don't know, something very simple, any kind of forecaster. How reliable are forecasters in the stock market? Oh, this guy said this is where the the Dow Jones is going to be. Great, let's track this and see how good he's going to do. And let's give this guy or this girl a reputation score based on their predictions. And start niche, and then suddenly you get really good at this, and then you can start scaling and you build yourself a reputation in this. So, but I think massive use case. I wouldn't try to solve it all from the start. I would not. I think this would be a difficult one. And you're working against some of the most powerful people in the world, right? So I'm not sure if I would want to be against those straight away. Yeah, that would be my kind of take. Yeah.
That was basically my question. So
Okay.
But to keep going a little deeper on that and piggybacking on what you said earlier about identity, because one of the problems I heard here earlier was that the news organizations themselves don't even know what video to trust that's up on YouTube.
Yeah.
And they see all the other people running with it. That becomes news.
Yeah.
Takes on its own life. So if the videographer were somehow tokenized, identified, what have you, or at least the videos that could be traced back, say yes, that did actually happen at that place at that time, and has some sort of authenticity to it. Is that something that could be applied here? Is that something?
I mean, definitely. I think you're answering the question yourself. I think what happens there is you need to combine a couple of things. So every video, everything that gets uploaded could be an NFT. So it could just be hashed, for example, and then you could say, oh, this is the video. This is when it actually was created. I'm the creator. I can prove this. So then, like, the authenticity of the origin is kind of taken care of. And then it's the next step then is how are these items being used and who says what about those items. So that's why I said I don't think anyone right now has all the answers to it, but I think we understand the puzzle pieces. What's going to be relevant there is that over the next 10 years, we put those puzzle pieces together. So I would start on one puzzle piece right now, not try to solve the entire puzzle. I think that would be really difficult. But I completely agree with you. That use case is big.
Do you have an idea of what that one puzzle piece to start with?
It depends what interests you. Like I said, the company that I advise works in who wants to solve identity, right? They are solving the problem of putting like university certificates on a blockchain. That's how they are starting. If you're more interested in social media in this space, then I don't know, try to tokenize videos, try to tokenize pictures. If you're more in the journalism space, then I don't know, pick a niche there that interests you and start thinking about how could you create transparency there. I always believe you don't necessarily have to love what you do, but you should love it at least a few times. You don't need to love it all the time, but at some point you have to. Otherwise, you're going to get really frustrated. Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, can you elaborate a little bit more on how do we connect physical assets to the blockchain so that we can maintain that trust in the supply chain? So maybe that Nike, I can, once I read it, I can then make a copy, or I can replace that copy somewhere along the way.
Connecting the physical and the virtual world, I think, is going to be a massive challenge for a long time. You always have this central connection somewhere that causes some problems, and you would have to solve it in different ways every single time. Sometimes with the insurance company, you would probably need to use an oracle. So you have a group of people that suddenly you trust. If you have a single item, you could, for example, go and say you take a picture, you hash this picture, and then you have a unique identifier. Or you have some certain characteristics. So, for example, with diamonds, the way they do it in diamonds is a bit easier to understand. So there they go with the 3 C's, color, cut, clarity. They define those, they take a picture of it, they hash all of those, and there's a unique hash that comes out of it. And so whoever then afterwards looks at a certain diamond can look at the picture, sees the characteristics, and can say, yep, that's the same diamond based on these characteristics, based on the picture. Okay, that's the same diamond than the hash that I'm seeing in front. So with a shoe, you would probably have to see, okay, if someone has the code, the token for the shoe, and can actually give me this token and actually has the shoe, yes, of course, he could still give me a fake, but then he needs to be able to transfer the token to me. So there is always like some connection there.
The coffee case, what would you think? Like how can we
So in the coffee case, the question is how detailed do I want to get? Do I want to trace every single bean? Probably not. I think it's probably okay to trace, I don't know, every little package that has, I don't know how many pounds of coffee in it. But so then what you would have is, you would have the coffee farmer, you would have a transport company, you would have some exporter, some importer, and all of them have to stamp that there is this amount of coffee coming in. So when I drink this coffee, then I should be able to see on the blockchain that this coffee is being used right now as a token on there.
So like the whole chain would produce proof
Yeah.
as proof.
Correct. And so, and there's a cost obviously there, and the cost, but the cost on mass, on scale, is negligible. On the individual case, there's always cost, but if you kind of scale this, then it becomes negligible on every coffee, on every cup that you're drinking.
This is not a silly question, but I just want to find out. So, a lot of people are talking about storing your personal info on the blockchain, but then and then you give permissions to whoever to access it. What's to stop them from not copying that information in that moment once you've shared it?
I'm not sure I get the question. Maybe you can ask the question again?
Okay, so let's say I store my personal information, where I live, my address, gender, all of that stuff, and I'll share that with a third party. What's to stop them from copying the information once they've received that?
Now I understand. Okay, so in the case of a blockchain, you have your private key, and thereby you encrypt the data. So the outsider can never copy the data; they can only encrypt the encrypted data. So it's not worth to them anything. They can copy the encrypted data, but it doesn't help them anything because the original data is not there. So that is the only answer I would have there, that no one can copy it. Yeah. Last question.
You left the medical field in order to solve medical problems with blockchain. You're not talking about medical problems at all. So where is standing?
No, I did. So I talked one time about solving the use case of, like, especially DNA testings there. And then insurance, I think that's also relevant. There's quite a couple companies right now who are trying to solve this. I'm not advising anyone at the moment. The reason, I think, is many of them are quite broad, and I don't like that. I would probably start with a very small use case. I would probably start with, I don't know, vaccinations. Such a narrow use case, and then, I don't know, these vaccination passes where you kind of record all your vaccinations, and I would trace those and make them, and store them on a blockchain. That's how I would start. At the moment, I don't see anyone doing these niche cases right now. There's a company who wants to build an entire blockchain for medicine. I'm not sure if this is going to be the right thing to do. But that's how I would start. So I would take a small use case and kind of do this. There's some interesting use cases. So they're working with a dating company. And so what they're doing is they found out that your DNA has some kind of effect on 15 different genes on your affinity for, if you're a male for a female and vice versa. So what they're doing is they're hashing this information, giving it to a dating app, and then the other party can hash it as well, and then they can kind of communicate and see if they have a match or not. This is very experimental at the moment, right? But I thought the use case was very interesting because you could kind of have better chances of finding another partner based on genetic information without revealing your genetic information. Yeah, like I said, it's like a very interesting early use case. Yeah, great.
Hi, thanks for the talk. Very informative. Question I have is, how do you, if you were in the manufacturing business and you had a non-serialized product, how would you attach a blockchain to it to guarantee the authenticity? Say, for example, you've got consumer products. I'm not too concerned about that right now. I mean, purses or whatever. But let's say it's something industrial. Turbine blades used in the jet engine. Parts in a heart valve, something like that. You're concerned about counterfeiting. If a part's too small, I mean, would you really actually embed a QR code onto the part itself? Or is it serialized? Or I'm having a little trouble putting those pieces together.
So that's a really fantastic question. So medicine has the same problem, especially if you talk about tablets, right? So would you serialize every single tablet? I think at some point maybe there's a better solution, but I think right now you would start that you have a certain quantity where you create some extra trust. So if you talk about heart valves, I don't know, instead of serializing every single one, maybe you have a package of, I don't know, I actually don't know how they are packaged or how they come, but let's take medication. You take like a pound of the same kind of medicine, and then what you want to see basically in a blockchain is when I receive this package, that it's being used and then being kind of burned. It's called burning in blockchain. So you want to see that this thing is being used. So so probably today and in the next week, in the next 10 years, I probably cannot do this for every single tablet or for every single item that you have that's non-serialized. But I could at least have a little bit of extra trust. So what I'm trying to say is you don't need to have it perfect right now. You just need to have a bit of a better solution. And that's how I would start.
Basically, something beyond a sticker, you can just kind of replicate and put on.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are designed to say, oh, this is genuine. This is, well, hell, yeah, this is
Yeah.
counterfeit now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much.